You bet.
Welcome.
You bet.
Welcome. Nice to meet you.
Good to see you.
One more.
Get rid of this water.
Thanks. I did, and when I came in.
Well, welcome. It is with great pleasure that I welcome Senator Kirsten Gillibrand. After 9/11, the people who responded to the disaster did so with a sense of courage, altruism, and humility, placing themselves in harm's way, and in return, many became ill from the experience. When responders are asked, what should be remembered from 9/11, they often respond, do the right thing. Well, it is apparent that we have the right legislators in New York who are doing the right thing. On behalf of all of us, thank you, Senator Gillibrand, for your vision and leadership.
Thank you all for being here, to so many of the advocates and the leaders who have been fighting this battle for these long years. We can all agree that we as a nation have an undeniable moral obligation to provide treatment for individuals who are sick and dying because of the terror attacks at Ground Zero. The responders and survivors living in this area were told by the federal government that the area was safe. They removed debris and recovered victims with little to no safety equipment to protect their lungs and their bodies from the toxic ash that invaded Ground Zero for months. And they tried to return to their normal lives as best they could and did all that our nation asked them to do. Now, years later, tens of thousands of these Americans are sick and dozens, perhaps hundreds, are dying. I've spent time with the parents of children who had been enrolled in schools and daycares at Ground Zero. These children are now suffering from grave lung disorders, including asthma, and could experience long-term health effects. On Long Island, there are over 5,000 people currently enrolled in the Long Island World Trade Center monitoring program, and another 1,000 that could be participating. This is a tragedy beyond our comprehension, and our failure as a nation to confront it should offend all of us to our very core. The James Droga 9/11 Health and Compensation Act that I've introduced in the Senate would fulfill our moral obligation to our heroes who have sacrificed not only their lives for our country and all the victims who are dying from the worst terrorist attack in our history. This legislation establishes formal eligibility requirements and provides health benefits through a national network for all of our heroes and all of our families. It also provides a level of accountability and transparency for the disbursement of funds that has not been seen in the current program. It will terminate the 6 billing systems that we have and have a single third-party administrator who will set reasonable rates, track expenditures, and enforce eligibility requirements, so we will have 100% transparency in this new program. It will also create a dedicated line of funding so that victims can receive consistent health care services. Additionally, it will ensure that survivors are compensated for losses that they've experienced as a result of the health problems connected to Ground Zero by reopening the Victims' Compensation Fund. I commend my colleagues in the House. They historically passed it in the House last week, right before adjourning. And that's just the first step on this journey to passing the 9/11 health bill. What I've done is I've requested fast-track legislation from the Majority Leader, Harry Reid, and he has now officially granted that. So because of his decision, we've now been able to invoke a specific rule in the Senate called a Rule 14 process that allows legislation to come directly to the floor for an up or down vote. So we will not have to wait for the committee process, which can take weeks, months, even years. To me and to all of us here, this should not be a partisan issue. This is an issue about a moral obligation we have as a nation to protect our heroes and our families that are suffering because of the 9/11 attack. We have to do all that's in our power to make sure these men and women and these families have the health care that they need and that they deserve. And I'm confident that the advocates and the families that stand with me here today and the entire New York delegation that we will get this done. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Well spoke.
Thank you.
I would like now to introduce the Dean from our medical school, Dean Koshansky, who will talk about Stony Brook's effort in terms of the response to the World Trade Center disaster.
Thank you very much, Ben. The Stony Brook School of Medicine and Medical Center truly recognizes the great value in the World Trade Center medical monitoring and treatment program for 9/11 responders here on Long Island, and for providing comprehensive care for those who served at Ground Zero. Being new to Stony Brook myself and learning about this program was one of the highlights for the last couple of months for me. It's vitally important that we not only care for and monitor the physical needs of the World Trade Center first responders, but also for their psychological needs and care. These individuals are heroes in the truest sense and deserve our very best. One of the things that I look forward to in this legislation is improving our understanding of the interaction between health and physical diseases and mental problems. I remember when I was a medical student a few years ago, I learned from my psychology and psychiatry course that there was a strong connection between psychological stress and trauma and ultimate emergence of health problems. There was actually a quantitative scale to this, but we had absolutely no understanding of what connects it. I am hopeful that understanding the medical and the psychological stresses that our 9/11 first responders are going through will help us understand and provide even better care for them and everybody who suffers psychological stress and physical disability. So I very much look forward to the passage of this act, and I support every effort to bring us better care and better understanding so we can make better care for the future. So thank you all.
Thank you, Dean. I would like now to introduce Richard Allies, who is from the fire department. He's deputy chief of the FDNY. Richard?
Good afternoon. Actually, I'm representing the Uniformed Fire Officers Association in New York City. My colleague Bill Lamaka from the Firefighters Union had to leave to go to Albany. But I just want to say, after 9 years of rallies and press conferences, today's actually a good day. On behalf of our organization, we'd like to applaud the efforts of the House sponsors, Representatives Carolyn Maloney, Gerald Nadler, Peter King, and Mike McMahon. Mission accomplished. We now look to our new leader, Senator Gillibrand, to gain passage in the Senate. She's distinguished herself as an extraordinary congresswoman and now as an amazing senator. So we have every confidence in her. We had a lot to overcome these 9 years. Just a couple of weeks ago at the final rally and press conference in Washington, D.C., prior to the vote, we were labeled as lobbyists. I take that as a compliment, actually, because lobbyists have a very difficult job. But we are not lobbyists. What we were on was an educational mission. We were there to educate some misguided legislators. Some who tried to label this bill as an entitlement. And providing health care for sick and dying heroic Americans is not an entitlement, it's a mandate. Then we had other legislators who tried to label this as a New York issue. The only thing New Yorkish about this bill is the fact that the World Trade Center, one of our shining examples of America's greatness, happened to be located in New York City. And the fact that hundreds of firefighters and fire officers, EMS workers, and thousands of civilians that were killed that day happened to live and work in the tri-state area. Make no mistake about it, this was an attack on America in an act of war. It could have happened anywhere. As a matter of fact, if it would have happened anywhere else in the world, America would have responded in kind. Some people think that when 343 firefighters and fire officers died on September 11th, that was the end of it. Yet we have hundreds of members who have now been forced into retirement. And when the book is closed on this terrorist attack, we'll have had thousands of lives shortened, and the suffering will be impossible to measure. This includes thousands of first responders from throughout the nation, as well as trade union workers, volunteers, community residents, who worked side by side with us during the cleanup when we were assured that the air was safe to breathe. And now many of them are sick and dying as well. I'm sure you all remember the famous photo op with our president with the bullhorn on top of a pile of debris with his arm around the shoulder of a New York City firefighter. And he promised us that the federal government would be there for us. He gave us the oath of the Oval Office that the federal government would be there to protect us. And now the House of Representatives has honored that vow after 9 years passing the bill. And we look to the Senate to do it in kind. So it ends up on the desk of President Obama, and he can complete the contract and pass and sign into law, the law of the land, the 9/11 Health and Compensation Act. Thank you very much. Thank you, Senator.
Great remarks. At this point, I'd like to introduce John Field, who's an advocate extraordinaire. I think that we all appreciate the efforts that John Field and his organization and the spearheading that he has done with many groups outside of his organization to give a face to this effort. And I offer my great appreciation and admiration for all that he's done. I'd also like to introduce George Bloom. He's one of these unsung heroes. George is president of one of the 1104 of the CWA. But he has been a loyal and strong advocate for this program since its inception, and heads our advisory board of people who have been affected by this great disaster. I also want to recognize all of the legislators who have joined us here today, our elected officials. So often elected officials, especially in this day and age, are given such a bad rap in terms of so many problems that people have. But I can say with having experienced it and lived it for the last 9 years, that these people have been there right behind us from the get-go, fighting and advocating and pushing for us. So all of you who are here, Ricardo, Brian, Bill, thank you so much for all of your efforts and for being here and for being with us shoulder to shoulder through these years. At this point, I also want to recognize the Dean, and we have also our hospital CEO, Dr. Strongwater. And again, the university has been a very strong supporter for us, and we appreciate their efforts in this great challenge. I think we've had a lot of talks and a lot of actually, not actually a lot of talks, but actually some very important, succinct talks. And I want to thank everybody for coming and being here with us. And go with strength, Senator.
Thank you so much.
Very good.
John, would you like to say a few words?
I don't think there's anything I can say that hasn't been said.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Any questions from the press on topic?
Senator, I'm wondering how concerned you are about a filibuster possibility.
Sorry, Senator, could you step
I
forward?
have not heard anyone who intends to filibuster this bill. What I also have not heard, though, is a Republican yet who will support this bill. So I've been working very hard to find a Republican who will be a champion and to bring others from his party to support this bill. Peter King on the House side has been instrumental in garnering support amongst Republicans, and having that bipartisan effort from the New York delegation was invaluable in the House. We need a similar voice on the Senate side, and I'm working very hard to convince some colleagues to be that voice.
Anyone in mind?
I have a number that I'm talking to, but I don't want to jinx anything.
The other question I have, if you have a moment, is the House bill came out with a way to pay for it that I know was ruffled some feathers in the Senate. Are you supportive of that, or are you looking for another way to pay for it?
I do support the pay for, but I have let my Republican colleagues know that if they disagree with the bill because of the pay for, that I would certainly consider other pay fors. Ideally, I would pass the bill exactly as it was passed in the House. So it wouldn't need to go back and have them vote for it, so.
Right. Do you have any other pay fors in mind?
There's lots of different pay fors that you could use. For example, the oil companies get $35 billion worth of tax cuts every year, and I would certainly use $8 billion of that to pay for the 9/11 health bill.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you.